Hello, my name is Miss Kilburn-Bond and I work with all the English departments in the schools within the Athelstan Trust. This is the second of 5 videos that I'm making to help you understand the English language paper 2. So if you haven't watched the first video, what that does is it talks about the paper as a whole, and I actually read the sources to you as well as looking at question 1. So if you missed that, you might want to hop back and watch that one first. But if not, welcome to the video in which I'm going to focus on question 2 in particular. So the objectives of the video, like in all of them, is to help you understand the overall format of the paper and then to enable you to revise the priorities for each question and develop a strategy that you can apply to each answer. In this case, to paper 2, section A and question 2. So what we're doing is we're looking at 2 texts which, as I've mentioned, I read in the first video, and you can also download a copy of them if you want to from the Athelstan Trust website. One is from the Horrible Histories series and is a description of some Christmas traditions in true Horrible Histories style. The other is a diary entry from the late 1800s by a teenager called Kate Fry, who's describing her excitement at setting up her Christmas tree to surprise her family on Christmas Day. So question 2, let's have a look at how that question's going to sound. You need to refer to source A and source B for this question. Both sources describe different traditions linked to the Christmas tree. Use details from both sources to write a summary of what you understand about the differences between the traditions of the Christmas tree in source A and source B. And this question is going to be worth 8 marks, and it should take you about 8 minutes, so that's easy to remember and to plan. 8 minutes isn't a long time, which is why it's so important that you have a strategy up your sleeve that you can apply to this question, so you know exactly how to do it so you can get the maximum marks in just such a short amount of time. And don't worry, that's what this video is going to give you. So let's look at the key sentence there in the middle. Both sources describe different traditions linked to the Christmas tree. So that's giving us our focus. That's going to be the idea we're going to be concentrating on. Use details from both sources to write a summary of what you understand about the differences between the traditions of the Christmas tree in source A and source B. There are some key words there that we need to be aware of. We're writing a summary. And what that means is you are not writing a detailed analysis where we're going to be talking about similes and metaphors and personification and alliteration. This is not that kind of question. What we're doing instead is we are going to be looking at inference. We're just going to be looking for evidence and inferring, and I'll explain that to you in a minute. But the first thing I want you to understand is no detailed analysis. You don't have time in this question. The second key word is that word differences. If you start writing about similarities, then you're going off the mark scheme and you're not going to get those marks. So make sure before you do anything that you're really clear about what exactly it is you're being asked to do by the question. And if it helps, highlight those key words before you even start writing. Now you'll notice we've got the examiner sitting there in the bottom left-hand corner. And hopefully what you can see now is a summary of the mark scheme that examiner would apply to your answer. So if we just go straight to the top, aim high to get 7 or 8 out of 8, this is what the exam board want you to do. They want you to show perceptive or detailed synthesis and interpretation of both texts. They want you to make perceptive inferences from both texts. They want you to make judicious references, use of textual detail relevant to the focus of the question, and they want you to show perceptive similarities or differences between the texts. So, to take away the examiner speak, there are 3 things that they want you to do. They want you to be able to make inferences. They want you to be able to say, this suggests that, this infers that, this implies that. Not analysis, just inference. They want you to be able to use quotes to support what you're saying, and they want you to be able to find similarities or find differences depending on what the question says. Those are the 3 things you've got to do. So you're comparing by finding similarities or differences. You're always going to use quotes to back up those similarities or differences, and when you've put in a quote, you're going to infer what that quote means. This suggests that, this tells me that, this makes the reader think that, this implies to the reader that. Okay, so hopefully that makes you immediately feel a little bit better about how you could do this in 8 minutes. So if I give you some steps to follow, and the pictures will start to make sense as we go through this. Step 1 is simply to find your evidence. So you know what your focus is, start looking for the evidence that you can use. What can you see in both texts that describe the traditions of the Christmas tree, and how are these different? Because that's the key thing in the question that you've got to do, so that's where you start. Grab your highlighter, look in both texts, highlighting, okay, there's a bit there about the Christmas tree, there's a bit about the Christmas tree, there's another bit, highlight them, and then think, oh, I can see that they're not really the same idea, and there you're ready to go. Ideally, if you could find 3 comparisons that bring those 2 texts together, that would be fantastic, but I've seen top mark answers with people who've just done 2 really well, so don't panic about that. What's important is what you do with the similarities or the differences that you can find. In this question, we're looking for differences. So here's an example on the text that we're looking at. Both writers acknowledge the Christmas tree as an important tradition, but only Horrible Histories links this to the Christian religion. So when I was going through the text, I was seeing that Christmas trees, lots of quotes that I could say, yep, Christmas trees are really important to Christmas for Kate Fry, Christmas trees are really important to Christmas in Horrible Histories, but it was only in the Horrible Histories book that was being linked to Christian religion all the time. So that gave me a great idea for my topic sentence, for a sentence that would set my answer going. So once you've got a comparative point, you're ready for step 2, and that's using SQI, and that's where those pictures on the right hand side come in. S for statement. You're going to make a statement about the topic. Here we've got the mountaineer standing on top of the mountain. He's put his flag in, he's confident that he has got something to say. Make a statement about the topic. Then you're going to put your quote, so your evidence, so you can see the fingerprint there under the magnifying glass. Your quotation, you're going to support that statement with the evidence, with your quotation. And then the I stands for inference, and that's where we've got the thinking brain with all the great ideas. Make an inference based on the textual detail. And remember what I've said, inference doesn't mean looking for metaphors and alliteration and onomatopoeia and particular adjectives. It just means you say, this suggests to the reader that. This implies to the reader that. This makes the reader think that. Those sorts of statements are what an inference is. Okay, so statement, quotation, inference. So across the top, we've got those steps again. Bring the 2 sets of details together. Then you make your statement. You support your statement with the text, with the quotation. Then you make your inference, and you'll see that they're in different colours, and what I'm going to do now is show you an example, a model of how that looks, and the model is colour coded to help you apply those steps to it. So here we have a strong paragraph that starts to answer the question. So you'll recognise the sentence in red. Bring the 2 sets of details together. Well, I've shown you this before, this was my initial idea. Both writers acknowledge the Christmas tree as an important tradition, but only Horrible Histories links this to the Christian religion. So already I'm saying to the examiner, here I am bringing my 2 texts together and giving you my main idea. You're already going to get points. Now I'm going to make my statement. In Horrible Histories, 2 different stories about the origins of the Christmas tree are linked to religion. There's my statement. There's me standing on top of the mountain saying, this is what I know about the text Horrible Histories. Now in purple, I'm going to give my evidence. Now you'll see that I've given quite a lot of evidence here. You could do this, it doesn't have to be this long. I'm just trying to show you different ways in which you can provide evidence. The writer explains how the pagans had originally worshipped an oak tree, but when Christianity was introduced, priests changed to a pine tree, believing that each point of its triangular shape could represent the Christian Trinity of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. In a different legend, Terry Deary describes Martin Luther cutting down a small tree to take home, having admired the stars twinkling through the branches of the fir trees and wanting to show his family how wonderful God's universe is. So I've actually given several different bits of evidence there in the purple. Sometimes they're direct quotations in quotation marks, and sometimes I'm just paraphrasing, I'm just summarising the evidence. Both are fine. And then finally, in green, I'm making my inference based on the details. So in this example, I've put, this suggests that the tradition of the Christmas tree is based on a desire to extend the Christian symbolism celebrated at Christmas time. So I've taken the purple evidence and now I'm summarising, okay, what does all of that suggest? What does it imply? What does it make the reader think? Now, that's not enough, because now we need to look at the second source. So, across the top, I've added a blue statement now. Use a comparative connective to SQI, statement, quotation, inference, with the other source. So, if we look at how this appears, you'll recognise the first section, the red, the blue, the purple, the green, that's what we've just read. And now we can see in that bold blue colour the word however. That's my comparative connective, showing the examiner, look, now I'm going to compare with the other text. So, however, in source B, Katie Fry doesn't make any reference to the Christmas tree as being important to a religious celebration. So you can see I've made another statement here. I've brought those texts together, I've made another statement. Instead, she describes the tree as a beauty that touches the drawing room ceiling and ought to be a huge success. The tree is crammed with things and linked to the hiding of the presents. There is no reference to religion or the symbolism of the decorations she describes. So there's my evidence. There are some direct quotations, but there's also a summary of my evidence, how I know that she's not talking about religion. And then in green, my inference. This time I've used this implies before I said this suggests. This implies that the Christmas tree tradition is more about creating excitement around the giving and receiving of presents and enjoying the aesthetic beauty of having the decorated tree inside the house. And with those two ideas brought together, we've now got everything that the examiner's looking for. So we bring the sets of details together. We make a statement, we support the statement with quotation, we infer, this suggests, this implies, then we use a comparative connective, and then we do exactly the same procedure again with the other text. And if you can do that a couple of times, you've got a really strong answer. And that is the strategy for question 2. The best thing to do now is to practice what that 8 minutes feels like, and then use that colour coding idea to see, is there something you're missing out? Is there something you need to add a little bit more detail with? Compare it with that model, and that will then mean that you can go into that exam with confidence. The next video is going to move on to question 3. Thank you for listening. I really hope that's helped you feel like you've got a strategy you can apply to that question.